The radio crackled twice. Then someone whispered my name like they were standing behind me, but I was alone in the tower. I checked the mic immediately, thinking I'd left it open, but the indicator was dead and the channel was clear again. I remember staring at the console for a second too long, waiting for it to happen again. But all I got was the usual static drift you hear when the weather shifts over the rid. I logged the time out of habit, 21:47, and wrote possible interference, even though it didn't feel like interference. That was the first thing that didn't sit right. I was on night watch at the North Station, about 8 miles from the nearest paved road, covering a stretch of forest that barely saw foot traffic outside of hunting season. That week had been quiet, just routine patrols and a couple of campers who checked in late and left early. Nothing unusual. Around 10:10, I got a call from Ethan and Marla. They were posted at an observation point further west, monitoring a flagged area where someone had been cutting unauthorized trails. It wasn't uncommon, but it had picked up lately, and we'd been asked to keep an eye on it. Ethan sounded tense, which wasn't like him. He said they'd been hearing something moving below their ridge for the past 20 minutes. Not animals, too steady, too deliberate. I asked if they had visual. He said no, just sound. Then Marla got on and said it had changed direction twice, like it was tracking them. That's when I told him to stay put and keep their lights off. I grabbed my field pack, checked my sidearm, and stepped out into the cold. The temperature had dropped fast after sunset, and there was a thin fog settling into the lower areas. My truck took a minute to start, which wasn't unusual, but it gave me time to think about that voice on the radio earlier. I didn't mention it to them. It didn't seem helpful. The drive out took about 25 minutes, most of it on a narrow dirt path that twisted through dense brush. About halfway there, my headlights caught something reflective on the side of the trail. I slowed down and angled the beam. It was a trail marker, but it had been turned around, facing the wrong direction. That wasn't normal. Those markers are fixed pretty tight. I got out, checked it, and sure enough, the bolt had been loosened just enough to rotate it. I tightened it back, but I didn't like what it suggested. Someone had been out here recently, and not just passing through. When I got within radio range again, I called Ethan and Marla. No response. I tried a second channel. Still nothing. The signal should have been clear at that distance. I kept going, but slower now, scanning the edges of the road. About 5 minutes later, I saw their vehicle parked where they said it would be, tucked near the tree line with the engine off. I pulled in behind them and stepped out, calling their names. No answer. The forest was quiet in that way it gets when something's off. No insects, no wind, just still. I approached the vehicle and saw that the driver's door was slightly open. Their gear was still inside. Radios, packs, everything. That's when I heard it too. A soft, rhythmic crunch, like someone stepping on dry leaves coming from downhill. I froze and listened. It stopped, then started again, a few feet to the left. I called out again, louder this time. Still nothing. I keyed my radio and tried to reach them again, but all I got was a burst of static that sounded almost like breathing. I moved toward the sound, keeping my light low. The slope was steep and uneven, with loose soil and scattered rocks. About 10 yards down, I found a set of footprints. 2 sets, actually. One was clearly Ethan's. He had a distinct tread pattern, but the other was unfamiliar, smaller, but deeper, like whoever made them was carrying weight. The prints led further down, then veered off into thicker brush. I followed for a bit, calling out every few steps, but the signal on my radio kept dropping, and the fog was getting heavier. At one point, I heard something behind me, another crunch, but when I turned, there was nothing there, just the faint outline of the trail above. I went back up and checked the vehicle again. That's when I noticed the logbook. On the passenger seat, it was open, and the last entry wasn't in Ethan's handwriting. It was mine, same initials, same format, but I hadn't written it. The timestamp read 2203, and the note said, "All clear, returning to base." I checked my watch. It was 2218. I hadn't made that entry. I hadn't even been there at 2203. That's when I felt something shift in my chest, like the situation had just crossed into something I couldn't explain. I called it into dispatch, reported the missing personnel and the altered log, but the signal was weak, and I'm not sure how much got through. They asked me to hold position and wait for backup, but I didn't feel right staying near that vehicle. I moved a bit further up the trail, found a spot with better visibility, and waited. About 10 minutes passed. Then I heard it again, that same whisper from earlier. My name. Not through the radio this time, from the trees. I turned slowly, scanning with my light, but the beam just caught fog and branches. Then I saw a flicker of movement, low to the ground, maybe 30 feet out. I called out, asked who was there. No response. Just that movement again, slightly closer. I raised my light, and for a second, I thought I saw a face, but it was gone before I could focus. I backed up a step, keeping my light steady, and that's when my radio came alive again. It was Ethan's voice, but distorted, like it was being pushed through a bad connection. He said, "Don't follow it." Then silence. I tried to respond, but the channel died again. I stood there for a long moment, trying to process what I'd just heard. Then I noticed something else. The footprints I'd seen earlier, they were now closer to the trail, like they'd moved. I hadn't seen anyone come up. I hadn't heard anything, but the prints were there, fresh, overlapping the older ones. I made the decision to pull back to the vehicle and wait for backup there. As I approached, I saw the driver's door was now fully open. I was sure I'd left it only slightly ajar. I checked inside again. Everything was still there, except the logbook. It was gone. I scanned the area with my light, and that's when I saw it lying a few feet away, on the ground near the edge of the slope. I walked over slowly, picked it up, and flipped it open. The last entry had changed. Same handwriting, still mine, but now it read, "Not alone." The timestamp was updated to 22:27. That's when I heard the engine of another vehicle approaching from the trail behind me. Backup had arrived. 2 units. They stepped out, and I briefed them quickly, showed them the log, the footprints, the vehicle. We split up and did a grid search for the next hour. No sign of Ethan and Marla. No additional footprints beyond what I'd already found. No movement. Nothing. Around midnight, we called it and returned to base. The official report listed it as a missing foot. Person's case, with suspected foul play due to the altered markers and unauthorized trail activity. But there were things I didn't include. The voice, the changing log, the way the footprints moved. Those things don't fit into reports. Over the next few days, we searched the area extensively, brought in dogs, drones, even a helicopter. No trace. It's not the first time something like this has happened out here. Not exactly, but close enough that people stop asking questions after a while. About a week later, I went back to the station to finish some paperwork. The logbook had been archived, but I asked to see it again. I flipped to the last entry, expecting to see what I'd written that night, but it wasn't there. The page was blank. Clean. No ink, no indentation, nothing. Like it had never been written at all. I checked the previous pages. Everything else was intact. Just that one entry missing. I asked the records clerk if it had been altered. He said no. It had been logged as received. No changes. I didn't argue. I just nodded and left. That night, as I was locking up, the radio in the office crackled again. Same pattern, 2 bursts. Then silence. I stood there, waiting, and just before I turned it off, I heard it. My name. Clear this time. And then faintly, behind it, 2 more voices trying to say something at the same time. The emergency call came from our own frequency, but no one on duty had made it. It broke through just after midnight, sharp and clear, using the exact phrasing we're trained to use during distress. Location grid, priority code, request for immediate assistance, but the voice wasn't one I recognized. And I know every ranger assigned within 50 miles. I replayed it twice to be sure I wasn't missing something. Same message, Same voice, same coordinates. The strange part was the location it gave. It pointed to a restricted burn zone that had been closed off for nearly 3 years after a wildfire destabilized the terrain. No one was supposed to be out there, not even us, without clearance. I checked the duty log. No scheduled patrols anywhere near that grid. I tried to raise the caller, but the line went dead immediately after the transmission. No static, no fade, just cut. I logged it and called dispatch. They hadn't received anything on their end, which made no sense because our channels overlap. They asked if it could have been a delayed recording or interference, but the timestamp was current to the second. I sat there for a minute staring at the map, trying to decide if it was worth escalating. Then the radio clicked again, and the same voice repeated the message, word for word, same cadence, same breathing pattern between phrases. That's when I decided to move. Protocol says you don't ignore a distress. Call, even if it doesn't add up. I grabbed my gear, notified dispatch I was heading out, and started toward the burn zone. The road leading there hadn't blocked off with a steel gate since the fire. When I reached it, the lock was hanging open. Not broken, just open. I got out, checked it, and saw fresh scrape marks around the latch, like someone had forced it recently, but then closed it again without securing it. I drove through and shut the gate behind me, more out of habit than anything. The air changed as soon as I crossed into the zone. The trees were still blackened in places, and the ground had that brittle, hollow feel under the tires. No wildlife sounds, no wind, just the engine, and the occasional crack of something shifting in the distance. About a mile in, my radio lost signal completely. Dead silence. I switched channels, checked connections, even tapped the unit, but nothing came through. That wasn't unusual in deeper areas, but it meant I was on my own for the moment. I kept going until I reached the coordinates from the call. It was a small clearing, surrounded by partially collapsed trees and uneven ground. No vehicles, no lights, no movement. I stepped out and called out, identifying myself. No response. I did a quick sweep with my flashlight and didn't see anything out of place at first. Then I noticed a patch of ground near the center of the clearing that looked disturbed. Not dug, exactly, but pressed down, like something heavy had been there recently. I moved closer and saw boot prints, multiple sets, some heading into the clearing, some circling it, and a few leading off toward the east. The odd thing was the pattern. They overlapped in ways that didn't make sense, like people had been walking in tight loops or pacing back and forth without direction. I followed one set a few yards and then lost it where the ground turned to ash. I went back to the center and tried the radio again, still nothing. That's when I heard a faint tone, like a distant beep, repeating every few seconds. It took me a moment to place it. It sounded like a personal locator beacon, the kind we carry for emergencies. I turned slowly, trying to pinpoint the direction. It was coming from deeper in the trees, east of the clearing. I hesitated for a second. That area hadn't been stabilized. The ground could give way without warning. But if someone had activated a beacon, I couldn't ignore it. I marked my position, noted the direction, and started in. The terrain got worse quickly. Loose soil, hidden dips, and fallen branches that shifted underfoot. The tone got louder as I moved, more consistent. After about 10 minutes, I saw a faint blinking light ahead. I picked up the pace, careful with each step, and reached a small depression in the ground. At the bottom was a beacon, partially buried, still active. I climbed down and picked it up. It was one of ours, standard issue. The ID number on the back matched a unit assigned to a ranger named Cole, who had transferred out months ago. I hadn't seen him since spring. I turned it over, checking for damage, but it looked intact. Recently activated. That's when I noticed something else. There were marks in the soil around the beacon, not footprints, drag marks, like something had been pulled across the ground and then stopped right where the beacon was. I followed the marks with my light, and they led up the side of the depression and into the trees. I stood there for a moment, weighing my options. No radio, unstable ground, unknown situation. Then the tone from the beacon changed. It shifted from a steady beep to a rapid pulse, which usually indicates movement or tampering. I looked down. It was still in my hand. I hadn't touched any controls. I turned it off manually, and the silence that followed felt too heavy. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, close, not behind me, in front. I raised my light and saw a figure standing between two trees, maybe 20 feet away. They were wearing ranger gear, same color, same patches, but something was off about the way it fit. Too loose in some places, too tight in others. I called out, asked for identification. No response. The figure didn't move. I took a step forward, and it took a step back, staying just at the edge of the light. I asked again, louder. This time, still nothing. Then it turned and walked deeper into the trees, slow and steady. I followed, keeping my distance, trying not to lose sight of it. The ground got worse, and I nearly slipped twice, but I kept going. The figure never ran, never looked back, just kept walking at a pace that forced me to keep up. After a few minutes, it stopped in another clearing, smaller than the first. In the center was a pile of gear, packs, radios, jackets, all Ranger issued. I recognized some of it immediately, items that had been logged as lost or damaged over the past year. The figure stepped aside, and for a second, I thought it was going to speak. Instead, it raised its arm and pointed down at the pile. I moved closer, scanning the area. No other movement. I knelt down and started checking the gear. Most of it was worn, some of it torn, but all of it had one thing in common. The name tags had been removed. Every single one. I stood up slowly, turning back toward the figure. It was closer now, closer than it shouldn't been without me noticing. I could see its face, but the light didn't catch it right. It looked wrong. Not distorted, just unfamiliar in a way I couldn't place. I asked who they were. This time, it answered. It used my voice. Exact match, same tone, same inflection. It said, "You came alone." I felt something tighten in my chest. I stepped back, reaching for my radio out of instinct, even though I knew it wouldn't work. The figure tilted its head slightly, like it was studying me. Then it said, again in my voice, "You came alone." I didn't respond. I just backed up slowly, keeping my light on it. Then it took a step forward. I turned and moved quickly back the way I came, not running, but not slow either. I didn't hear it follow, but I didn't stop to check. I retraced my steps as best I could, using the terrain and the faint marks I'd made earlier. It took longer than I expected, but I eventually reached the first clearing. My truck was still there. I got in, started the engine, and drove straight back to the gate without looking back. When I reached it, I saw something that made me stop. The gate was open again. I was sure I'd closed it. I got out, checked it, and saw the lock was gone this time. Not broken, just missing. I didn't stay. I drove back to base and reported everything I could without sounding like I'd lost it. They sent a team out the next morning, full sweep. They found the clearing, the disturbed ground, even the depression where I'd found the beacon. But the beacon itself was gone. So was the pile of gear. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing. Just the empty space. They asked if I was sure about the details. I said yes. They filed it as an unconfirmed incident and closed it within a week. Said it was likely a misidentified trespasser and environmental confusion due to low visibility. I didn't argue. It's easier that way. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. A few nights ago, I was back on duty, running a routine check on the radios. Everything was normal. Clear channels, no interference. Then, just before I signed off, a call came through. Same format as before. Same phrasing. Same coordinates. But this time, the voice was mine, and the timestamp was 5 minutes into the future. The trail camera showed 3 of us walking past at 0213, but only 2 of us had gone out that night. I remember replaying the footage over and over, thinking maybe the angle was wrong or the timestamp had glitched, but the third figure was there every time, keeping perfect pace just behind us, matching our stride like it belonged. The problem was, no one had signed out for that patrol except me and Darren. and the logbook confirmed it down to the minute. We were covering a section of backcountry that had recently been flagged for unauthorized campsite activity. Nothing violent, just people setting up in restricted zones and leaving behind a mess. But the reports had gotten strange over the past week. Campfires found still worn with no one around, tents packed neatly with no sign of who owned them, and once, a pot of water left boiling over a dead flame, like someone had just stepped away and never came back. That kind of thing doesn't make the official reports, but it gets passed around enough that you start paying attention. That night, dispatch had asked us to do a late sweep after a hiker reported seeing a light moving through the trees in an area where camping wasn't allowed. We didn't expect much, probably someone trying to avoid a fine. We signed out at 0140, checked our radios, and headed down the east trail. The weather was clear but cold, and the ground was dry enough that you could hear every step if you weren't careful. Darren walked ahead, scanning with his light, while I kept an eye on the map and our position. About 20 minutes in, we found the first sign, fresh footprints leading off the main trail. Not unusual, but they were spaced oddly, like whoever made them had been walking slowly, deliberately placing each step. We followed them for a bit, until they led us to a small clearing. There was a tent set up near the center, no light, no sound. We called out, identified ourselves, and waited. No response. Darren approached first, unzipped the flap, and checked inside. Empty. But everything was there. Sleeping bag, pack, even a pair of boots placed neatly by the entrance. I circled the perimeter and didn't find any additional tracks leading away, just the ones that came in. That's when I noticed the fire pit. It was cold, but the wood inside had been arranged carefully, like someone had just built it and hadn't lit it yet. I crouched down and touched it, no warmth at all. Darren said it felt wrong, and I agreed, but we logged it and moved on. About 10 minutes later, my radio picked up a faint transmission. It sounded like static at first, but then I caught a few words. "Stay where you are," repeated twice, then cut off. I asked Darren if he heard it. He said no. I tried to respond, but the signal dropped immediately. We kept going, heading toward the coordinates the hiker had given. The terrain got steeper, and the trees thicker. Around 2:10, we passed one of the trail cameras mounted on a post just off the path. I remember glancing at it, seeing the red indicator light blinking, and thinking it was good we'd have a record of the patrol. We didn't know how important that would be later. A few minutes after that, we heard something behind us, not loud, just a soft crunch, like someone stepping on a twig. We both turned at the same time, light sweeping the trail, but there was nothing there. No movement, no sound. Darren shrugged it off, said it was probably a deer. But the forest had gone quiet again, and that silence stuck with me. We continued for another 5 minutes before we saw the light. It was faint, flickering between the trees, just ahead of us. We approached slowly, calling out again. No response. The light moved once, and disappeared. When we reached the spot, there was nothing there. No camp, no fire, no person. Just a patch of ground that looked recently disturbed, like something had been dragged across it. I knelt down to check it, and that's when my radio came alive again. Same voice as before, clearer this time. "Don't turn around." I froze. Darren asked what was wrong, but I didn't answer right away. I was listening. The voice repeated it, louder now. "Don't turn around." I told Darren what I heard, and he said he still wasn't getting anything on his end. That's when we both heard the footsteps again, closer this time, directly behind us. Darren started to turn, but I grabbed his arm and told him not to. We stood there for a few seconds, just listening. The steps stopped, then started again, circling us slowly. We couldn't see anything in the trees, but the sound was clear, deliberate, like someone was walking just outside our light. Darren called out, demanded whoever it was to identify themselves. No answer, just the footsteps. Then they stopped completely. The silence that followed was worse. I told Darren we should head back, report it, and come in with a larger team. He didn't argue. We turned and started retracing our steps, moving faster now. About halfway back to the main trail, We passed the camera again. This time, the red light was off. I stopped and checked it. The unit was still powered, but the indicator wasn't blinking. I tapped it, thinking maybe it had glitched, and it flickered once, then went dark again. Darren said we should keep moving, so we did. We reached the trailhead around 0240 and returned to base without seeing anything else. We filed the report, noted the radio interference, the empty campsite, the moving light. Standard procedure. It wasn't until the next day, when we reviewed the camera footage, that things got worse. The clip from 0213 showed us walking past, just like we remembered. But there was someone else on the edge, but something else in the matter. Frame. A third figure. About 6 feet behind us, moving in sync. Same pace, same stride. The face wasn't clear, but the outline was. It was wearing ranger gear. Same uniform. Same patches. We checked the roster again. No one else had been assigned to that area. No one had signed out. We pulled footage from earlier in the night. Nothing. Just us entering the trail. No third figure. We checked later clips. Nothing. Just us returning. It only appeared in that one segment. We zoomed in, tried to enhance the image, but the details didn't improve. The face stayed blurred, like it was just out of focus no matter what we did. That's when I noticed something else. The way it moved. It wasn't just following us. It was matching us exactly. Every step, every pause, even the slight shift Darren makes when he adjusts his pack. It mirrored all of it, perfectly. We brought it up to the supervisor. He reviewed it, asked a few questions, then told us it was probably a glitch, compression artifact, maybe a shadow caught at the wrong angle. He signed on the report and archived the footage. That should have been the end of it. But later that night, I went back to the office to grab something I'd forgotten. The place was empty. Lights dimmed, just the hum of the equipment running. I passed by the monitor station and saw the camera feed still open. The clip was paused at 0213. I don't know why I stopped, but I did. I stared at the screen for a minute, looking at that third figure. Something about it felt off in a way I couldn't explain. Then I noticed the timestamp. It had changed. It now read 0214, 1 minute later than before. I checked the log. The original file still said 0213. I went back to the screen. The figure had moved. It was closer now, not 6 feet behind us, maybe 3. I leaned in, trying to see the face again. This time, it was clearer. Not by much, but enough. It wasn't unfamiliar. It was me. Same jacket, same build, same way I hold my shoulders. But I was already in the frame, walking ahead. I felt my stomach drop. I stepped back from the screen, not sure what I was looking at anymore. Then the image shifted again. The figure took another step forward. Now it was right behind Darren. I looked at the timestamp. 0215. The footage wasn't supposed to be moving. It was a recorded clip. I reached for the keyboard to stop it, but the controls weren't responding. The screen flickered once, and the image changed. It showed the trail, empty, no one in frame, just the path and the trees. Then, slowly, from the left side, the figure stepped into view. Alone this time, it walked toward the camera, stopping just short of the lens. The face was still blurred, but I could see the outline clearly. It raised its head slightly, like it was looking directly at me through the screen. Then the feed cut to black. I stood there for a long time, not moving, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Eventually, I shut down the system and left. I didn't report it. I didn't know how. A few days later, the camera from that trail went offline completely. Maintenance said it was a hardware failure, probably from exposure. They replaced it and moved on. But I kept thinking about that footage, about the third figure, about the way it moved, and about what the voice on the radio had said. Don't turn around. Because when I think back to that moment on the trail, when the footsteps were circling us, I realized something I didn't notice at the time. Darren never actually turned around either. And if neither of us looked, then there's no way to explain how the camera caught what was walking behind us, or how it knew exactly how we moved.